In just over a month's time, citizens of the US will choose to either award the current incumbent of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue with another 4 years in the office, or to replace him. And today, those two main party candidates, President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden, will face off against each other in the first of 3 pre-election presidential debates. The subsequent debates are due to take place on October 15th and October 22nd, respectively. And their vice presidential nominees, that's Vice President Mike Pence and Kamala Harris, respectively, will debate each other next week on October 7th. While I know there is strong opinion on this channel as if we should even mention politics here, we do focus on cleaner, greener, safer and smarter transportation and energy after all, it's frankly impossible to cover that sector without acknowledging the impact that politics have on our day-to-day lives. And that, of course, includes everything from electric vehicle incentive programs and fuel economy targets through to which vehicles the federal government purchases for its own vehicle fleets. As I detailed in this video here, anyone who cares about the drive towards sustainable transportation and energy should really have at least some interest in what's going on in their home country's government. And while I acknowledge not everyone who watches this channel even lives in the US, or to that matter cares about US politics, we, the entire team here, unanimously decided that it was a smart decision to give you a just the facts portrayal of where each of the two main party candidates stand on issues that could impact the adoption of cleaner vehicles, the energy mix of the nation, and as a consequence, the reduction of global greenhouse gases around the world. To prepare this video, I have spent significant time reading up on policy pledges on each of the two main candidates' websites. I've looked into the things that they've said on camera in the past, and I've examined the actions that they have either been part of as their respective time in office or caused to come about. And at the end, I hope you'll use the information that I've provided to come to your own conclusions about whom you'd prefer in office come January 20th, 2021. President Trump, Vice President Pence, or President Biden and Vice President Harris. In today's video, I'm just focusing on the primary candidates though, rather than the running mates, because adding them to the mix would make the video pretty long. Before I get stuck in, I would just like to throw in an acknowledgement to something. While the Democratic ticket has a fairly traditional campaign website with each topic in the Biden-Harris manifesto given its own in-depth exposition, the Trump-Pence website focuses on what the campaign is calling promises kept, which are in effect things that it has done in office to date, rather than have any pledges for the future if they are re-elected. I note this because this fact makes it significantly harder to carry out an exposition of these two main party candidates' policies on an even playing field. That said, I hope that what we've done here has done that to the best of our ability and will give you all of the important information you need to make your own informed choices. Another caveat for full disclosure. I am a registered voting Democrat, and in 2014, 1 year before I emigrated from the UK to the US, I was the guest of the US Federal Government Department of Energy and the Department of Transportation at a 2-day Clean Transportation Sector Initiative workshop in Washington, D.C. I hope these facts have not clouded my research or judgment, but they have provided me with background into the various energy programs I will be covering here. But I felt you should know. With that all out of the way, let's get going. President Trump's attitude towards electric vehicles is not clean-cut, and it can easily be misunderstood if we are not careful. Back in late 2018, the president said on Twitter that he was, quote, cutting all GM subsidies, including for electric cars, end quote, after General Motors announced that it would be closing some of its production facilities and laying staff off. In a follow-up report to Time magazine, Larry Kudlow, director of the National Economic Council, said that, quote, we are going to be looking at certain subsidies regarding electric cars and others, and whether they should apply or not, end quote. The president also stated, as part of his criticism of General Motors and its CEO, Mary Barra, that, quote, all electric is not going to work. It's wonderful to have it as a percentage of your cars, but going into this model that she's doing, I think, is a mistake, end quote. 1 month after decrying GM for announcing a closure of its facilities, though, the president was cheering Volkswagen for announcing an $800 million investment in Chattanooga, Tennessee, in order to ready its production facilities for the production of ID4 and other electric vehicles. Contextually, it's only right to note at this point that the anger and the praise seem to have been focused not on electric vehicles per se, but rather job destruction and job creation. These are not the only times that this has happened either. Tesla and Elon Musk was similarly praised for announcing Texas as home to a new electric vehicle manufacturing facilities, and Musk has been called by Trump, quote, one of our great geniuses on occasion. And just yesterday, Lordstown Motors, which has been a strong supporter of the current administration and its re-election efforts, held a photo opportunity at the White House with President Trump. There were claims made during that photo op which don't appear to stand up to scrutiny, such as a claim that Lordstown is the first electric truck company and the first electric truck with a front trunk, but I am going to leave those claims from Lordstown for a future video on the company. At face value, it would be unfair to claim that from the interactions I've just given you that the president is necessarily against electric vehicles. And without a traditional manifesto, it's difficult to pin down a specific future policy direction. However, based on other past actions, it is clearer to see where the Trump-Pence administration may go. During a rally in Grand Rapids, Michigan in March 2019, President Trump riffed on the then reasonably new Green New Deal resolutions, that's House Resolution 109 and Senate Resolution 59, which had been introduced to the 116th United States Congress by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Ed Markey, respectively. Here is what he said.
No more airplanes, no more cows. One car per family. One car. You're going to love that in Michigan. Hey, how do you like that? Yeah, one car per family. I don't think. You know, I don't think one car per family in Michigan plays too well. Do you agree? Right? Not too well. And it's got to be, of course, an electric car, even if it only goes, what, 160 miles. What do you do? It's 160 miles, darling. Where do I get a charge? Where do I get a charge, darling?
Legislatively too, there have been several attempts to remove assistance for electric vehicle mass adoption, both at the consumer and the automaker level. Every budget proposal from the Trump administration has sought to end the US federal tax purchase incentive program for the purchase of battery and hydrogen electric vehicles, as well as end the Advanced Vehicle Technology Manufacturing Loan Program. In order to understand the impacts of both of these, though, let's take a step away from the candidates and explain the histories of each. While the tax credits for new car purchases have often been portrayed as something that was introduced under the Obama-Biden White House, it was actually first introduced by President George W. Bush. The original program offered up to $2,500 off the purchase price of a new clean vehicle, but that was increased and revised to $7,500 maximum, with a new 200,000 vehicle per manufacturer limit under the Obama-Biden White House. As for the Advanced Vehicle Technology Manufacturing Loan Program, it was also established under President Bush in the fall of 2008. Its intent was to provide debt capital to automakers specifically for the purpose of funding projects that would result in vehicles that would not only meet higher gas mileage standards, but also lessen dependence on foreign oil. While Nissan, Fisker and Tesla all successfully applied for funds under the program to bring about the production of plug-in vehicles, Ford used funds from the program to develop its V6 EcoBoost engine, as well as also produce electrified vehicles. Tesla famously repaid its $465 million loan under the program early in May 2013. Nissan was next, repaying its loan in 2017, and Ford is expected to finish repaying its loan in 2023. Of course, Fisker defaulted when it went bankrupt, with the DOE recovering some, but not all of the money it had awarded the company. Interestingly, President Trump's goal of eliminating these programs, as well as other renewable energy programs under the Department of Energy will actually negatively affect Lordstown Motors, which has had its eye on some of the $17 billion still in the funds available to companies under that program. Opponents to tax credits include the American Energy Alliance and American Fuel and Petrochemical Manufacturers, the latter being a major oil refinery trade organization, both of which have donated to the Trump-Pence re-election campaign. They've worked for many years to paint any EV grant schemes as a burden on US taxpayers that should be ended. Although not directly connected with electric cars, energy policy is also something that has a major impact on electric vehicle adoption, which of course brings us to the rolling back of Obama-era fuel efficiency and emission standards that the current administration is trying to execute. Corporate average fuel economy standards are effectively the stick that consecutive governments in the US, and in fact around the world, have used to get automakers to produce more fuel-efficient vehicles. And of course, it is the reason why the aforementioned AVTM loan program came into existence in the first place. Previous administrations, namely the Bush administration, cognizant of the need to raise fuel economy targets, wanted to assist legacy automakers and startups alike with funding to help the auto industry develop vehicles that met those targets. And as a side, those targets were not only met by automakers, but very often exceeded, sometimes by a large amount. This shows that while legislation is important, market forces can often drive automakers to compete against each other for better fuel economy. But as recent downward fuel economy averages in the US show, it does not mean that market forces alone can drive the shift to cleaner vehicles, especially when paired with much lower cost fossil fuels. Which brings me to other policy decisions made by the current Trump-Pence administration. Cutting so-called red tape has been a constant in the current White House, and that has taken the form of rollbacks to both environmental protection policy and rollbacks on bans of things like oil drilling in areas of scientific or cultural importance. Again, this is not directly related to electric vehicles, but the current administration's move to expand offshore drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, approving liquefied natural gas terminals, reversing decisions on the Keystone XL and Dakota Access oil pipelines, and reversing a ban on new oil and gas development on federal land, highlights policies as they stand today. It has also greenlit oil and gas drilling in Alaska's pristine Anwar region. Then there is the Affordable Clean Energy Rule, a proposal from the EPA in 2019 to remove certain elements of previous legislation relating to clean energy under the auspice of removing red tape. While the proposal was presented to the public as being a win for clean energy and clean jobs, in-depth analysis from organizations like Resources for the Future, a 501c3 non-profit organization focused on building a healthier environment and a healthier economy, suggests that in some areas emissions could actually rise, not fall, if those EPA proposals are followed. Finally, of course, there is the withdrawal of the US from the Paris Climate Accord, something that's due to take place shortly after the presidential election. In addition to withdrawing the US from that agreement, President Trump has called anthropogenic climate change a hoax, claimed it was invented by China to hurt US manufacturing, and publicly teased Greta Thunberg at his rallies. More recently, he has said that, quote, "I don't think it's a hoax, I think there's probably a difference, but I don't know that it's man-made," end quote. To President Trump's rival, former Vice President Joe Biden. As I noted at the top of this video, the Biden-Harris ticket has much more conventional campaign website content, and thus it does lay out specific pledges for what their government would look like. This does make it easier to evaluate future promises, and of course I will also look back to Biden's position in the Obama White House for further evidence. Dealing with the effects of climate change and an urgent need to slow down man-made global warming is one of the campaign's cornerstone issues, and the Biden-Harris ticket is pledging to achieve a 100% clean energy economy with net zero emissions by no later than 2050. In order to do this, Biden is pledging to use executive orders, something which is contentious regardless of whom is in the White House, to, quote, demand that Congress enacts legislation in the first year of his presidency that establishes an enforcement mechanism and includes milestone targets no later than the end of his first term in 2025, makes an historic investment in clean energy and climate research and innovation, and finally incentivizes the rapid deployment of clean energy innovations across the economy, especially in communities most impacted by climate change." End quote. Part of this pledge includes accelerating the deployment of electric vehicle recharging infrastructure, committing to adding an additional 500,000 public charging stations across the US by the end of 2030. On the subject of federal tax incentives, the Biden-Harris campaign is pledging to extend the federal tax credit program for electric vehicles, focusing it on, quote, middle-class consumers and, to the greatest extent possible, to prioritize the purchase of vehicles made in America, end quote. What is not stated is the explicit mechanisms of that program, but I would personally expect either an upper limit on which vehicles are eligible based on sticker price, or an income limit to prohibit high earners from taking advantage of this tax code, or perhaps both. Also proposed is a variation on an existing proposal from last year by Senator Chuck Schumer of New York, which is designed to get American families to switch out older, less efficient vehicles for cleaner, greener ones. That plan would give lower-income buyers larger incentives to get their new car than those with higher incomes. Funding these and other rollbacks based on current administration policy would likely come from rescinding some of the massive tax breaks President Trump has enacted for large corporations and the wealthiest 1% of Americans. The Biden-Harris campaign also says that it will end subsidies for the fossil fuel industry and has committed to not accepting any campaign donations from any oil, gas, or fossil fuel companies. In addition to supporting the rollout of electric vehicles, the Biden-Harris campaign says that it will enact legislation and provide funding for new public transit projects, both in terms of electrifying the public bus fleet in the United States, but also investing in what it's calling the second great railroad revolution. This would include a new passenger northeast corridor between Washington, D.C. and New York, completing the California high-speed rail project, and establishing a coast-to-coast passenger rail service across the US. Part of the stimulation for the electric vehicle marketplace proposed by the Democratic ticket includes a new mandate for the federal procurement system, ensuring that all US governmental facilities and buildings are not only powered by clean energy, but that all fleet vehicles, when retired, are replaced with zero-emission ones instead. This is part of what the campaign calls harvesting the purchasing power of the federal government and its supply chains. If you're interested, the federal government spends about $500 billion per year on transportation and energy. With regards to energy and the economy, the campaign promises to set out a new series of standards for buildings, including mandates on refrigeration regulations to only permit refrigerants for AC systems that have no potential to harm the environment if they happen to leak. If he wins the election, Biden is committing to spending twice of what was spent on the Apollo program, that's $400 billion over 10 years in today's money, on research and developing cleaner energy technologies, improving the electrical grid, and working on cleaner fuels. For clarity, though, that mix does include controversial fuels such as biofuels and small-scale modular nuclear reactors. Because the Biden-Harris pledge for clean energy and vehicles is so extensive, it is more than 10,000 words in length, I'm not able to cover everything in this 3,500 word script. But to be fair to the campaign, I feel I now need to reiterate some of the past things that Biden was involved with as part of his 8 years in the Obama-Biden White House. This included the 2009 American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which involved a private-public partnership that resulted in nearly $240 billion of investment in clean energy, as well as the establishing of a fund to build 48 national electric vehicle corridors covering 25,000 miles across 35 US states. That administration also established the ARPA-E program that was responsible for helping drive investment in new energy technologies. And of course, there was the CAFE fuel economy standards designed to improve fuel efficiency of passenger vehicles in the US, as well as a brand new fuel economy average for medium and heavy duty vehicles. Let's be really clear though, the Obama-Biden White House was not a shining beacon on a hill for the clean energy industry. It too was responsible for handing out billions of dollars of subsidies for the oil and gas industries. It allowed oil and gas drilling. It even allowed expansion of pipelines. And let's not forget the lobbyists connected to both the Obama-Biden White House, who have ties to the fossil fuel industry, just as there are ties to some of the people that are close to the Biden campaign. They may not be taking money from the fossil fuel industry, but there are still connections that are there. So there you have it, the two major party candidates and what they've done and what they're pledging to do in the future for cleaner energy and transportation. I would love to know your thoughts in the comments below, but please do keep it respectful. We are all adults and we should be able to use words, not anger, to communicate, even if we disagree. And after all, respectful discourse is something that many of us have kind of forgotten how to do. That's it for today's video. As always, thanks to the folks on my right for being our $15 to $49 a month Patreon supporters. Special thanks to our $50 a month Patreons, that's John Lyons, Regine Fellows and Jeffrey Songster. And our deepest gratitude to our $100 a month Patreon supporters, that's Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, JP Fagerbank and Sean Udea. You can join all of these cool people by following the links below, or you'll also find a link to send us a donation through Ko-fi or Bitcoin. There's also a link to our free Discord server, so sign up and join in the fun, as well as links to help you figure out how to register to vote. And don't forget to check out our new t-shirts and other merch, which are in their brand new Redbubble store. After the names are finished scrolling, you'll see a suggestion for a new video to watch from this channel, so please consider watching it if you haven't yet, and I will be back very soon. Thanks for joining me, and as always, keep evolving!